Welcome back to Podiatry Marketing. I'm your host, Jim McDannald, joined by always my trusty co-host, Tyson Franklin. Tyson, how's it going today?
I am fantastic, Big Jim. How are you doing?
Things are good. Things are good. No complaints here. Family's healthy. Excited for another episode where we dig deep into a podiatry marketing topic and give the listeners something exciting to kind of on the morning commute. Maybe it's after work. Maybe they're on the treadmill. Who knows? But listen
Could
and
be anywhere.
learn a little bit. Yeah, exactly. Anywhere in the
Well, what's
world.
funny, I had someone I was talking to recently, and they said they've gone right through my old podcast, It's No Secret, Dr. T. They've gone through the 211 episodes there. They're right up to date on the Podiatry Legends podcast. And they said, now I'm devouring the podiatry marketing. And they said, they go, I've got so much information going on in my head, but they're actually enjoying the show. They said it's fun because
That's
it's
awesome.
not long. They're not like overly long episodes, but we pick on a particular topic, which I think every podiatrist should be just paying attention to.
No, that's nice feedback to have. It's nice to hear that other people are out there. That person's probably heard your voice over 500 episodes now. So that's pretty impressive feat
Yeah.
for that person.
Yeah. They go to sleep with my voice in their head. How bad's that?
Scary thought. Scary thought.
That's
Well,
scary thought.
enough about your diehard fan, I would say. But what
Our
are we jumping
diehard
into
fans.
today? Oh, okay.
Today we're going to talk, back on episode 56, we spoke about storytelling adds value to your business. And that's looking at storytelling like on a macro level, as a higher level. What I want to talk about today is what we call micro storytelling. And that's more talking about your business and yourself, but more on a micro level, and you actually get to control the narrative. So you get to tell the story. And there's a lot of podiatrists that are a bit paranoid about sharing anything about themselves online because they're like, oh, what if my patients find out something? I don't know what it is about their life that is that exciting that they want to keep a secret. But you can really control what the patients learn about you.
That's very interesting. So you're basically talking about finding out little personality tips, a little personality about who you are, what kind of food you like, what kind of
Yeah.
burgers you enjoy, things like that.
Yeah, well, most of my patients knew I loved hamburgers. My patients knew that I played the guitar poorly. But there was a lot of things that I do, and I just slowly posted things on social media, on our website, and brought things into my business that slowly told that story. And I think one of the easiest ways to sort of understand this is if you've ever watched a show on TV like Law and Order or CSI. Have you ever watched any of those? You a fan
Yeah,
of
actually,
those?
one of my coach's sons was in NCIS Los Angeles, and so I've watched that show a few times.
Yeah. So if you think of the original CSI when it came out, the one in Las Vegas, and Grisham was like the main character. Now, in the initial episode, all they did was just show the main characters, who they were, didn't really give you any background on them. But as the seasons go on and the popularity of the show increases, they start giving you a little bit more about their backstory, who they are, where they came from, past marriages, people that there might be somebody else on the show that they've had a bit of a crush on for a long period of time, but you were unaware for the first 3 seasons. All of a sudden, it's just popped up. And then you find out, like Grisham, for example, what his interests were outside of work, that he ended up having a hearing problem. So as the season's gone, they slowly tell more and more about the character until by the time a show ends, if you said to someone, tell me about Grisham, for example, they can tell you everything about him. Happens on Law and Order. But what they do, the writers, they're the ones that are narrating the story. They can take it any way they want. And I think you can do exactly the same thing with your podiatry business and yourself. On how you explain things to your patients, you can tell the story.
I think that's a really good point. I think, a lot of times when people are utilizing Facebook or social media, even like their website or paid media, they'll just kind of jump to have you make an appointment. Let's just make an appointment. It's all like,
Yeah.
here's what plantar fasciitis is. And I think you bring up an interesting point is that it's not only about the care that they receive, but it's also the person behind the care. And when they see you, people want to receive care from interesting, other humans and people. They don't want just to be medicine to be this kind of sterile, really kind of like impersonal. I think sometimes, whether it's dentistry or medicine, sometimes gets that rap of being sterile and impersonal. But if they have a little bit of your backstory, they know who you are, and it just can kind of endear you more to your patients and the people in your local community.
Well, give me an example. I'll use you as an example. You could write an article on shin splints or heel pain or ankle pain from running. You write that article, you put it on your website. Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. A few patients may see that. They might respond. They may not. However, you post a photo about shin splints, whatever, but you also may include a photo of you walking with your family in a park. And that's the photo you use that, shin splints or these problems can occur not just with running, but also just with walking. But they get to see your image of you and they go, Jim's married. Jim has children. Could be another article that you write, or you may do an adaptation of that article, but it's a photo of you running. Or so they go, Jim has a family. Jim has children. Jim runs. I'm a runner. Therefore, and I've got kids. Jim and I have got a lot in common. And I know where that park is. Now, it's not they're looking at that park and go, I'm going to hang out in the park behind a bush, wait for Jim. I'm going to follow him home and break into his house while he's asleep at night.
Hopefully not.
And watch him and just watch him, stand above him and just watch him. Just like that. They're not doing that. But then later on, you post something else and you make a comment or you post a photo. Here's a photo, a blast from the past. And it's you on the Olympic team. And they go, hang on. So Jim has a family. He's got kids. He goes to this park, which I go to. He runs. I'm a runner. Bloody hell. He's been to an Olympic Games. How cool is that? I want to go and see Jim. But it's not that you go and post all these photos in the first week you open your practice, because they're going to go, I don't care. I don't want all this information, Jim. I don't even know you. But as you tell that information over a period of time, they get to know you. You're the family man. You go walking. You love the outdoors. You love to run. And then you slowly start ramping it up with, oh my God, you're pretty awesome. You're in the Olympics. So, and that's an example of one way of just telling us a bit of a story.
No, I like that. I think it kind of reminds me of, when I moved to Canada, or the first time, you meet your significant other, you don't give them like the day by day or the year by year breakdown of like the trials and tribulations of your life or what makes you interesting. Because honestly, nobody really wants to hear all that stuff all at one time. But
it's too much.
But if you can tell things in an interesting, storytelling fashion, the highlights, a little bit of here and there, just a little bit, parsing it out a little bit at a time, whether to be your patient or that significant other. It does kind of like, makes your story more palatable or more interesting to people, especially if it's more relevant to them, as opposed to, like you said, just kind of like putting all that stuff out in the first week, right? That would just be too much for people to try to process.
Way too much.
They're living their own lives. It almost seems boastful in a way. So I think you're right about this. Micro storytelling can be a pretty powerful, technique to get your message out there for people to learn more about you.
A perfect example. Last night, sitting on the lounge talking to my daughter. And she's going to go off to university next year. She had one of her friends here. I said, which uni are you going to? She said, I'm thinking of going to Griffith Uni. I went, right, yeah. I said, I went to Griffith Uni for a while after I finished podiatry. And my daughter went, what did you go to Griffith University for? I said, when I did accounting. I've known you for 18 years. When the hell did you do accounting? I said, when I finished podiatry. And she's like, I never knew this. She said, so you're an accountant? I went, no. I realized partway through that I didn't want to be an accountant. So I gave it away. And there were other reasons. Plus the podiatry clinic got busier. But so here's something that I shared with my daughter that she was totally unaware of. But but that's part of my story. It just has never come up in conversation. So there's so many things about yourself that your patients just don't know, but would actually find interesting.
Yeah, sometimes it can like add a sense of mystery or a sense of like, wow, like, maybe there's a connection there in a way. Like, for example, like when my mother was younger, her and her family moved from Illinois to Louisiana just for 1 year. And my mother would tell, I never knew about this. And then I would see occasionally like years would go by, or you come across some photo and it's like, that doesn't look like the place where you grew up. And it's like, oh, that's right. That was that year that you lived in Louisiana of all places. Like, how did that happen again? Like, it's just, it can be a source of like intrigue, right? So
it is. I think it's anything like that. But like I said, when you meet someone for the first time, you don't dump all your baggage on them. Like if I told my wife my whole life story when we first met, she would not be my wife. I had to drip feed her the information over a period of time. I had to gain her trust. And that's the thing. Once you gain your partner's trust, you can then tell them some other things about yourself and probably some of your dark past. But because they know, love and trust you, when you do start telling them your dark past or bad things that may have happened, they're quite open to accept that. And I think your patients are the same. Once they get to know, like, and trust you, some will love you, can be a bit awkward sometimes. But when they get to know, like, and trust you, then you can share a little bit more. And it doesn't mean you share the same information with every patient as well. There'll be stuff you put on social media for the broader audience, but there may be stuff you share with a patient in a room that you don't share outside of that. And that's still you're still controlling the narrative as you're going along.
And I think that comes down to also, like we've talked about in the past, is like kind of how the kind of patient doctor relationship or the patient podiatrist relationship has changed over time. I think this is definitely a huge issue for people in the US, right? With HMOs and insurances and things, people are expected to see 30 to 40 patients a day and develop that same level of trust or just that bond between patient and the doctor. That's a fragile thing, and patients will feel when it's a very transactional relationship. And by building in storytelling, by creating those kind of shared connections with patients on a human level, it's a great way just to like build bonds in your local community, but also it just shows that you are, like you said, a trustworthy person. Someone that connects with people on a different level than just the person who's running from treatment room to treatment room, trying to see 50 people, grabbing. People are gonna be busy, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of people got into medicine is to have those, special relationships with people. Sometimes difficult they can be difficult at times, but it's a different type of thing where it's not just like going to the fast food restaurant and ordering a burger and getting a burger, right? Like you're part of these people's lives and you're part of helping people get better. And by incorporating some of this micro storytelling in there, it just helps cement that bond between patient and physician.
Oh, I definitely agree. And there's so many areas that you can do it in. Like I said, what you tell a patient in a room could be different to what you put on social media, which would also be different to, like, say, your newsletter, for example. Your newsletter can be a newsletter, or you can use your newsletter like it's a storyboard. And you can look at your newsletters over the next 12 months. What story do you want to tell? So I've got one particular coaching client who had a child recently. And I said, children are one of the best marketing tools you'll ever get. I said, because patients have been with you for a long period of time. They may have known you before you were married. They've seen you get married. And then from the marriage, all of a sudden you're pregnant. And they've been with you that whole time while you've got pregnant. Now all of a sudden you've had the baby. You can't keep the baby away from them because some of them they've known you for years. They want to know what's happening. So I've got her putting a section in her newsletter, but it's being narrated by the baby. Oh, this is what I've learnt this month. So her child is now talking to the patients, and she reckons the feedback's been great. But she's now using part of that to tell a story each month when the newsletter comes out. The patients are interested to find out what's happening next, and she'll do that for a period of time until moves on to something else.
Yeah, that's an excellent example of like different ways of telling a story. I think it gives, there's a level of, empathy or just like shared, we all have shared experiences. And I think, a lot of maybe other parents in her clinic will kind of remember what that was like, or maybe people that haven't had children yet, it's an opportunity for them to kind of connect with that physician in a way that otherwise maybe they wouldn't have that connection. So I think it's an interesting way to kind of, like I said, just kind of share that connection.
Yeah. And so I think look at your life, look at all the things that you do outside of work, and you may feel, oh, this is too boring, or my patients would not be interested in what I'm doing. But you'll be surprised that they do want to know a little bit more about you. And don't fear that you're going to tell them too much about yourself and they're going to follow you home from the park and then stare at you while you're sleeping at night. Because the thing is, you don't realize they see you anyway. They see you at the shops. Unless your practice is miles away from where you live, or where I'm here in Cairns, there is no hiding from your patients. You go to the shops and you're waving at them all the time. If you went out for dinner, there'll be a patient at the restaurant. If you're at a sporting event, there's going to be people that you know that are at the sporting event. So they see what you're doing anyway. So I think micro storytelling is about just reminding them of what you do, but you get to control the narrative. You get to tell the story, and you can make yourself look far more interesting than what you are.
Well,
Because if you're boring, you can actually make yourself think, my podiatrist is so interesting, but you might be
yeah.
dull.
But I think you bring up a good point there as far as like your place in the community as well, because I think sometimes, like you said, um, when you're in the clinic or you're wearing the white coat and you're kind of in that doctor-patient relationship, like in the clinic, but it extends beyond that. And,
Yeah.
by showing that you are an active a member of the community, it helps kind of lead additional trust and credibility to who you are. And, it just sets up, this, like the stories that you tell, it just enriches the overall, community, and the patients will see you there. And I think it's a really helpful thing.
Yeah. And if you're in Rotary or Lions, Apex, one of the organizations that does work in the community, it's just slip it in there every now and then. Let people know that you're doing it. If you're at a Rotary event or you're helping out, you're flipping burgers and someone takes your photo, put it in your newsletter, put it on social media. Your patients will see that and go, wow, not only, okay, I know you're busy at work, but geez, it's nice to see you giving back to the community and not asking for anything in return.
Now
And
that's
to me, that just builds a bond it builds a bond you can't pay for.
I think that's huge, especially like nowadays. I think, during all the lockdown and the COVID related stuff over the past few years, people are searching for ways to connect with other people. And whether it's volunteering or, both either medical or non medical related things, I think, you know, diabetes associations in the United States is a big way for podiatrists to really have a huge impact on only
Yeah.
not the health of their local community, but also educating their community about the impact of diabetes. So, finding those areas that are of interest to you, connecting with your community with a story that really resonates, not only for yourself, but really helps other people in your community can be a huge way. And like you said, don't be shy about, putting it onto your social media or, onto your clinic website, just to show the people that you are that advocate for the community, but you're out there, helping create, not only telling the story, but helping create a better story for you and your community.
And if you have team members that work with you, tell their story. Share their story amongst what you're doing as well. So, and make them understand that micro storytelling is a good thing. The more your community knows about you and the people that work in your business, and they realize that you've got the same beliefs and values, then that is just, it's just all positive. There's nothing negative by doing it. Like I said, I haven't heard anyone yet that does micro storytelling who told me they've been followed home.
I think you make a really good point about the staff though too, because I think there's whether you're in medicine or where you're at, you have people from different backgrounds that come in and can really be positive, make a positive impact on your clinic. And sometimes by telling those people's stories or celebrating them publicly, whether on your socials or your website, telling a little bit about who they are and how they got to be where they are, it sometimes can really be an inspiring thing for other people. Whether it's you yourself or someone on your staff. Someone that never thought that they would be a podiatrist, never thought that they could be, the manager of a clinic, could potentially see themselves in that role. And they're not always like Rocky type stories, right? They're not
Yeah.
always the scrappy underdog from the wrong side of the tracks that does well. But, it's sometimes these, people from middle class backgrounds that were looking for meaning in their life and they really found that helping patients or, contributing to a team that's helping is something that really inspired them. And maybe that, sharing that story through some storytelling, whether it be on your social, on your website, can really, create kind of, some positive, not necessarily PR, but just, positive examples for other people locally to kind of say, hey, like, that clinic's doing it. So let's continue this in my line of work, or I'm inspired to change my career and do something different. There's different ways to these storytellings can have a real impact on the community where you live.
Yeah. And even with the Podiatry Legends podcast, it's the feedback I get from people. Well, most of the positive feedback, people say, oh, that episode was good or that was great. But they love it when the podiatrist they have on isn't just talking about a specific topic, when they're sharing their story. When they're actually talking about, and I just did one this morning that was just, we dove into stuff that I don't even think she thought we were going to dive into. And when it all finished, I said, "Oh, are you okay with that?" And she went, "Yeah, it was fine. I didn't even think that's what we we're going to talk about." But I know there'll be people that are going to listen to that episode and go, "Wow, that's me. I was like that." So if they can do it, it means I can do it. And I think your patients will even see you as the podiatrist when they'll see things about you. They go, "Oh, they're actually got similar interests to me."
Well, it's an opportunity to learn. Sometimes us as physicians, we think, oh, like we're going to go in there and tell our patients all about these things. And we're going to so as much as we like to tell our own stories, it's important to listen to the patient's stories as well.
Yeah.
Whether it's on your podcast as well as listening to the people's stories that come onto your podcast, there's, instead of sometimes having to go through trials and tribulations on our own, sometimes we learn about someone else's story, whether it be inspired by it, or we just make sure we don't do something that we heard they did in their own life story. So it's the story, the kind of the benefits of storytelling are kind of multifaceted, and this micro storytelling topic is something that it's got many layers to it.
Yeah, and it's true what you said about your patients. Same thing, you'll have a patient that will walk in and try and tell you their whole life story on that first visit, and it almost kills you. So don't do that.
I know those patients.
Yeah, so don't do that. You don't want to be that podiatrist that is doing that. But you'll get other patients that'll come in that you've been seeing for years, and over a period of time, they just drop little bits of information. And I recall one particular patient, he passed away, but he was older, and I was seeing him for a certain period of time, and all of a sudden, I remember one day I said to him, "Okay, you're in World War II, weren't you?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "You've never spoken about it." I said, "I get veteran affairs guys coming here all the time, and I tell you, some of them I reckon were 60 pounds soaking wet, and they're telling me how they defeated the whole German army by themselves." And I said, "But you've never spoken about it." He goes, "Oh, never thought about it." He said, "No, let me think. I'm 80 years of age, and the army was 3 years of my life. I did a lot of things beforehand. I did a lot of things afterwards that were far more interesting." And that's the stuff that he told me about.
One of my orthopedic colleagues, when I was in practice, super soft-spoken guy from the American Midwest. He never wanted to brag about anything, but he was one of the early podiatrists who worked with Nike. And, the roster of like famous American athletes that came through the clinic in the 1980s and the early 90s when he was kind of in his prime as an orthopedic surgeon, Michael Jordan, like all of these, just superstars would come through there. And I was not in the practice at that point in time, but, he would never mention it one iota. You'd hear these stories kind of from the other physicians, and he'd be willing to talk to you about it. If you wanted to talk to him about it, but never one to throw that out there. Like that one time I was treating MJ, or, that one time I was treating Prefontaine, who's like a famous Oregon distance runner. No, just super humble, and you really had to pull it out of them. But it's like those little stories, like whether it be from a patient or a colleague, you can learn a lot from, and it just makes life that more intriguing and interesting.
Yeah, well, you don't need to tell the story when you have a 10-foot photo of you and Michael Jordan on the wall of your clinic. That's what I'd be doing.
There was no
People
photo
go,
like that. Yeah.
"Is that you?" I go, "Oh yeah. I don't like to talk about it. I just have it as the whole wall is one big photo. But I don't like to talk about it.
Yeah,
I'm humble." So I think we've covered this subject pretty well. So Jim, I think I'll let you wrap it up. So that was fun.
Yeah, Tyson, thanks a lot for sharing this episode on micro storytelling. If anyone's got some stories they want to tell us, they can head over to podiatry.marketing. Fill out that comment form. Let us know how we're doing. If there's topics you want us to discuss, we've got ideas, but we're always open to listener feedback. So head over to podiatry.marketing. And until then, we'll talk to you next week, Tyson.
Okay, see you then. Bye.
Bye.